Hello everyone, this is the first part of my demo on how to make a chain. This is a chunky chain, classic design. This bracelet has a toggle clasp which will be hand fabricated as well. We'll be using sterling silver round wire with a thickness of 2 mm. We'll also need a small amount of thicker wire for the clasp, 2.3 mm, plus a half a dozen of smaller jump rings. For the first step, you need to anneal your wire, but wait, there is a safety alert. Do not anneal your wire like this. When you heat up wire for annealing, it softens and expands and will spring up suddenly. The safest way to anneal wire is to make a tight bundle like this. Make sure you tuck the ends of the wire in to keep the wire tightly together. This is also safer for your wire as it will be less likely to overheat and melt when annealing. Now that our wire is annealed, we can make a coil and use that to make jump rings. Use a 4.7 mm mandrel and a vise to coil the 2 mm round wire. With the pliers, bend one end of the wire so it can be wrapped around the mandrel. Because this is thick wire, it is not that easy, so you can brace yourself against the vise. The goal is to squeeze both the wire and the mandrel into the vise. Clamp the vise on both the mandrel and the wire and tighten the jaws to make sure the wire does not slip out, and you can then start coiling your wire. The coil should be as tight as possible so that the jump rings end up being all the same size and shape. So it is quite important. Now we'll speed up the video. So you must keep the same tension all around as you pull the wire, and make sure you leave no gap between each turn. The coil should be as tight as possible. And you see that I'm using a wooden stick to push the wire down once in a while. As you keep working, the wire will get much harder, but try to keep the same tension all the way, all around. Okay, it is almost time to open the vise to remove the coil and the mandrel. And then we'll remove the coil by sliding it off the mandrel, and we'll anneal. That's our next step. Use a soft bushy flame with a little bit of orange at the tip. That's your annealing flame. And you can lift the coil just a little bit to be able to heat up the metal more efficiently. Let's speed up again. And to make sure the whole coil is evenly annealed, you can start at one end and then work section by section. So that's it, it's annealed, and we can now quench and pickle, and the next step is sewing the jump rings. Let's get started. Don't forget to lubricate the blade, use wax, and use your bench pin. You see that I have modified my bench pin to make it easier and safer to sew the coil. Don't be afraid, make your life easier and cut or file a notch or a knob on the front of your bench pin. push the coil against the pin. Remember to hold your work safely and to keep your fingers out of the way. And you start cutting from the top of the coil, sewing the jump rings one by one. Every time you sew one jump ring, your saw makes a notch on the following link just below. Use that notch to guide your next cut and to make sure you are sewing on a straight line. And make sure you catch your jump rings in the bench drawer. And don't worry about your bench pin. You can sew right into it. That's what it's for. So let's have a look at what it looks like so far. Okay, and let's recap the steps for sewing these jump rings. Check the tension of your blade, lubricate the blade, use your bench pin to hold and sew the coil safely. Sew starting from the top of the coil and start by making a notch on the first couple of links to help you sew in a straight line. So we are almost ready for the next step. So now we have our jump rings. We'll have to open some and close some in preparation for soldering. To speed up the process, we'll divide them into two piles. To open and close, we'll use two pairs of flat or parallel pliers. You brace yourself on the bench pin. Your pliers move back and forth, not sideways, which would distort the jump rings. You need to handle the wire carefully and to position your pliers so you are not denting it. Remember that we won't be able to file the links that are dented because that would change the shape and thickness of the wire. We must keep the links as clean and pristine as possible and preserve the integrity of the wire. Closed links must have a very tight seam with no gap. To open the links, use the same back and forth motion with the pliers. Let's have a closer look at these links. This one is good. The seam is very tight. There is no gap. No light comes through. That one, though, there is a gap. The seam is not tight enough. It must be tightened as solder will not fill the gaps. We are done for now. In the next video, I'll show you how to solder the links. Thanks for watching.